Mhm.
Life is for the living, and we need to celebrate those people we've lost and we've loved, but we need to celebrate our own lives too.
Absolutely. Hello and welcome. My name is Michelle Wolf, and you are listening to the Move Forward podcast. Each week, we will be talking about living life to the fullest and making the intentional choice to move past trauma. I'm a registered massage therapist, a whole food lover with farm roots. It's important to slow down, take time for healing, and to incorporate proper nourishment through fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset. During this journey, I'll be speaking openly about my personal experiences with cancer, loss of a loved one, wellness, and infectious optimism. Plus, you'll get to hear interviews with many truly inspirational and informative guests. We'll tackle each challenge with courage and care. Thank you for joining us on a mission to move forward in body, mind, and soul. Now let's begin. Today's guest is Nancy McDonald, author of Boy from Berlin. Nancy's husband, Heinz, passed away after 43 years of marriage. It was shortly after his passing when she began an incredible journey of discovering the secret past of her husband and his family. Nancy shares her journey and how she continues to overcome the struggles and pain after losing her partner. It was a pleasure to speak with Nancy, and I am sure her story will inspire many of you. Now let's begin. Hello and welcome, Nancy, to the show.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here and to share your story with our viewers. So before we begin, I'm just wondering, so you live in my hometown area, Stratford, Ontario, and where did you grow up?
I grew up out west in Calgary. I took journalism at the University of Western Ontario, and it was while I was still a student there that I met the man who was going to be my husband. In January of the year that I was taking my degree, we had a guest speaker come in from W5, CTV's W5. And at the end of it, my professor said, well, why don't you ask him if you could go and spend reading week at W5? I thought that sounded like a great idea, so I did. And the guest speaker said, sure, you can come and spend reading week at W5. When I told my professor this, he said, that's great. You're going to meet a lovely man and a terrific producer by the name of Heinzs Aunt. And I remembered thinking to myself, wow, Heinzs Aunt. Now there's a name I'm not likely to forget.
Yes.
Very unusual name. And turned out he was a most unusual and wonderful man.
Okay. So then you fell in love.
Well, we didn't fall in love right away. I went for that week, and then after school that year, my brother and I backpacked through Europe. I came back. I had a job at W5. I got a job from that week, and I re-met this man, Heinzs Aunt. And really, our relationship started off really as a friendship. I didn't know anybody in Toronto, and he was a nice man who had separated from his first wife. And I thought, we could just be friends. But we were destined to be more than friends. So, yes, indeed, I did fall in love with him and shared the next 43 years of my life with him.
That's beautiful. So then after the 43 years, he passed away, unfortunately.
Yes, he did. He had been struggling with dementia.
Okay.
And so the last, I would say, maybe 8 years of our marriage, it was an increasing struggle for him.
Mhm.
And eventually he succumbed to it. And, it's a funny thing, Michelle, because even although he was 17 years older than I, and he was, suffering from dementia, I never really imagined that he would actually die.
Mm.
So when he did, I was shaken right to the core because, you have to imagine that everything that happened to me in my adult life he was there for. I met him when I was 21 years old, the day before I turned 21.
Mm.
So every single thing that happened to me in my adult life, he was there for. It
Right.
was a huge, huge shock. And and as you can imagine, the grief was just almost unbearable.
Hmm. You speak about that. You say that your days went quiet. So, did you have people around you to help you cope with that, friends and family, or did you find that you were kind of dealing with on your own, or?
Well, I had friends and family, but you know, I found that I really just wanted to be alone.
Mm.
There was just so much to process, so much to think about. And I didn't think that being with people was going to be particularly helpful. I think I thought that it was probably going to be distracting more than anything else. So I was on my own a lot for 3 or 4 months. And then a friend from Lethbridge, Alberta, came out to help me do some decluttering. She's a great declutterer. Everybody should have a friend like her. And she came out and we started to go through things. And we started with a big filing cabinet that I had that was full of files from all my years of work as a professional writer. So we were going through them pretty smartly. And I came across a little manila colored file folder, very thin. And it stood out because it wasn't colored like all the others were blue or yellow or red. And this one was this little manila file folder. And I thought, gosh, I don't remember seeing that little file folder. What's in it? And I opened it up and I immediately recognized that what I was looking at they were letters, they were copies of letters that my husband's father had written to the British Air Ministry and the British Home Office between 1938 and 1940.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not recall ever having seen these letters before. I started to look through them. There weren't very many of them, but I realized, oh my goodness, there was so much that I did not know about my husband's father and about my husband's very early life. And I immediately became quite interested in it because it became quite apparent to me that my husband's father, Rifat, was a very, very successful aeronautical engineer. He was originally from Constantinople in Turkey. He'd gone to Berlin in the 20s, late teens, early 20s, to get better educated, to upgrade his education. He had fallen in love with Heinz, my husband's mother, and they had married. And they had done very well in Berlin in the 20s. But in the early 30s, Hitler came to power.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that my in-laws did not tell their children was that they were Jewish.
So so he didn't know.
No,
Heinz.
Heinz didn't know he was Jewish until he was
Okay.
50. We found out when he was 50. So he didn't know anything about this when he was a child. His father, because he had patented a kind of a game-changing fuel pump, it was a self-priming fuel pump, and it allowed fighter planes to go up higher than they had before and faster, so they wouldn't stall out. So you can imagine, you know, in a war, this is kind of a big game changer.
Mm-hmm.
But he did not want to stay in Germany, so the family had fled in the night in 1938. It was a perilous flight to get across the border into Holland. They stayed in Holland for a couple of years, but the day that the Nazis bombed Rotterdam and Holland fell to the Germans, they got out on a little fishing boat for England. And that too was a very perilous trip. They made it eventually to England and were there for about 8 months before they set sail for Canada. So I had this sort of sketch of a story there that was really quite amazing. My husband was very young when all this happened. He was only 4.
Okay.
So his memories were not very clear of anything happening. And of course, his parents had protected him from knowing a lot about his past anyway. When
Sure.
they arrived when they arrived in Canada, his father, his attitude and basically what he said to the family was, so we're now Canadians and we're going to speak English and we're going to be Canadian.
Right. And just forget about everything that had happened for safety, really.
For safety, and I think, because in those days, you were very lucky if you got into Canada, and he felt that this was what they were all going to be. They were going to be, Canadians. The interesting thing about that is that in doing the research, I discovered that between 1940 and 1945, Canada only admitted 12 Jewish families to the country.
Wow.
So Heinz's father had said at Pier 21 that he was a Turk of Turkish descent. He did not ever say he was Jewish, nor did he say that his wife was Jewish. And Pier 21 accepted that. And so they came into the country as Protestants.
Okay. Wow.
I
And so
know, it's
you
pretty
didn't know,
amazing.
and you didn't know any of this, like Heinz didn't talk about this sort of thing when he
Heinz
grew
didn't
up.
know he didn't know anything about it, Michelle. He really
Wow.
didn't know. His parents put him and his brother. They enrolled him and his brother at Upper Canada College in Toronto. And in doing more the research, I got hold of the archivist at Upper Canada, and she said to me, "Well, here are the cards for the 2 boys." And on their cards was given the religion was Protestant.
Hmm.
So they had no idea that they had been Jewish, and they really had no idea the tremendous pressure that their father had been under to get them out of Germany and then to get them out of Holland and finally to get them out of England.
That's incredible.
Yes, well, Heinz's father's name was on Hitler's blacklist, which was a list of people who were to be arrested immediately upon a successful invasion of the United Kingdom. It's not clear exactly what was going to happen to the people on that list, but it wasn't going to be pleasant, that's for sure.
Hmm.
So this was one reason that Heinz's father was so eager to get out of England and get to Canada.
Now, didn't you say that so Heinz's aunt had passed away in a concentration camp as well?
Yes, she was murdered in a concentration camp.
Okay, so not everyone got to come, mostly just like his specific family.
Oh yes, absolutely. His father had a brother and 2 sisters. The 2 sisters ended up in Italy. They were safe in Italy, and the brother ended up in South America, and he was safe too. But on Heinz's mother's side, both her brother and sister were murdered in concentration camps.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're slowly discovering all this information, speaking with his family. You travel to Rome as
I
well?
traveled to Rome to visit his last remaining relative who lived there, but she had converted to Catholicism and had buried her Jewish heritage very successfully. And she didn't really want to talk too much about that. She was the one who did confirm that both Heinz's aunt and uncle had been murdered in
Okay.
concentration camps. But that was about all that she was able to give me. I did go to Berlin, and I hired a researcher there who found out some things for me. I went to the old family home and walked around the old family home. I got a tour of it and the neighborhood. So I kind of immersed myself in that. And then I went to The Hague, where they had lived for 2 years prior to this scary departure on a little fishing boat for England. And I went down to the dock at Scheveningen to see where they had taken off from. And it was it was a terrible, terrible day. The Nazis were pounding Rotterdam with bombs, and there were many, many Jewish families on the docks at Scheveningen trying to get out, but there were no Dutch ship captains who wanted to take them out. And without giving too much away, in case people are interested in reading the
Yes,
book,
of course.
my late father-in-law was the one who was successful in getting his family on a fishing boat and on their way to England. He was an incredibly resourceful man.
Wow. So when you were learning all this information and investigating everything, how did that make you feel about, your husband wasn't with you? You were still probably grieving. But yeah, how does that make you feel while you were there and
You
through this
know,
process?
it was really hard in some ways because it was something that clearly I would love to have shared with him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also comforting in another way because I felt closer to him
Mm-hmm.
by being in that house and getting the house in Berlin and getting a sense of how he had lived. They had lived a very, very nice life. And I got a sense of how he had lived as a little boy and the places that he had gone to. His mother took him to the zoo a lot, to the Tiergarten, to the park across the way. So I got a really, enhanced sense of what his life as a little boy had been like. And then again in The Hague, which is a beautiful little city, I got a sense there too. And I must say that standing on that pier and looking out at that dark North Sea and thinking about a little fishing boat going across that North Sea with, U-boats lurking and mines in the water was a very dangerous time. That too brought me closer to him.
Mm-hmm. I have the chills right now.
Well, it sure gave me the chills. And so the interesting thing was when I finished doing all of this research, I thought, well, what am I going to do with it? I'm not really sure. What am I going to do with it? Because my grieving was certainly far from over. I don't think it will ever be over, really.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, maybe I should just write like a little history for the family. But there wasn't really enough concrete detail to do that in an interesting sort of way,
Mm-hmm.
because all the major people, and this happens so often in families, all the major people who could answer the questions I needed answered were all dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they really hadn't left very much for me to go through. So I thought, well, I'll just start writing. Sounds crazy, but I started writing, and a very, very interesting thing happened. It became a story told by Heinz, his story, and told in his voice.
Mm.
So the whole time I was writing it, it was actually kind of as if he was writing it. And I got to know my husband as a little boy, I would say very well.
That's so amazing.
Well, it's a little bit different way of going about things. Usually you know somebody as a child and follow them through. But in this case, I knew the man so well that when the little boy who became that man started to sort of help me write this book, I really, really, really got to know him a lot better.
Mm-hmm. That's such an interesting story. So so is this the first book you've ever written?
The first novel I've ever written,
First
yes.
novel, right. And so I had assumed that when you were doing all this, looking into it and whatnot, I assumed that you were getting that research for the book, but in turn you had decided to do that afterwards.
I did. I did. I just got interested because I thought, gee, I need to know more about this family. They're clearly a fascinating family that never talked about their fascinating life while they were alive, at least not to us. And I just wanted to learn more about them.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I was trying to piece together all these little, bits of information that I had acquired that I thought, maybe as a novel, it would work best. It has a lot of sub-themes to it. Heinz believed himself to be his father's least favored child. There were three in the family: his older brother Peter, his sister Phoebe, who was in the middle, and Heinz, who was the youngest. And he perceived himself to be his father's least favored child. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you perceive something, it's your truth.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the sub themes in this. Is sort of, you know, these kids, first they're German, then they're Dutch, then they're English, then they're Canadian. Except they weren't any of these things really, because their German citizenship was removed from them. Heinz was a year old when he lost his German citizenship. They didn't never get Dutch citizenship, although they lived in Holland. They didn't get British citizenship, although they lived in England. And they didn't get their Canadian citizenship for maybe 5 years after they moved here. So he was kind of, a stateless person in a way. So part of the theme, one of the themes in the book, is finding your place in the world. And I think it resonates very, very much today with all the refugees we have.
Mm-hmm.
Before, up till now, the largest relocation of refugees was during World War II and after World War II. Today, the refugee crisis is much, much, much greater than it was even back then. So you have all these people who are leaving homes that they know and going to places they don't know and trying to figure out how they're going to fit in and how they're going to live their lives and how they're going to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
This is a theme of the book Boy from Berlin as well, because that's what this family had to do when they came to Canada.
Right. And I bet that actually happens to this day. I bet children aren't necessarily told their past or where they came from, and would maybe go through similar situations or issues like Heinz went through, not knowing where he came from.
Oh, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly today, anti-Semitism in Europe and the UK and even here in Canada and the United States is on the rise. So this is a whole new generation of Jews who have to decide what they're going to do.
Right. So, okay. So Nancy, you've written this book and you've put it out to the world, and I'm sure you've met some pretty incredible people along the way. Would you say that you're happy or you're pretty proud of doing this so that you're able to continue, able to carry on, but also still have that piece of Heinz with you?
Absolutely. It was really, Michelle, a lifesaver.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lucky happenstance for me. I think I would have been quite lost, quite at sea, um, quite depressed for a long, long time if this hadn't just landed, fortunately, in my lap. And it gave me a reason to get up every morning, and a reason to get up every morning.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it. That's how I like to say it as well. It's like you need to have a reason to get up every morning. Otherwise, why would you? And if you're sad or if you're grieving, and especially with every morning you woke up next to him, I'm sure, and with not having him there, that would be devastating.
It was. So it gave me a reason to get up in the morning, and it also I'm very happy with the book. There's a sequel coming out this year. The story continues. I'm very happy with both of them because they're aimed at kids 8 to 12, although anyone can read them. But they're a very great starting point for parents to discuss with their children all kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm.
World War II, persecution of people, where do you fit in your family, all kinds of subjects like that. It's a good starting point for parents to talk with their kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is really important, that communication.
Yes, so I think that the book has succeeded for me beyond my expectations for that reason, and the reason that I've been able to shine a light on a wonderful, wonderful man who never shone a light on himself. He was a tremendous producer, director for many years. He was a great mentor to a lot of young people, young journalists, and but he was a very modest guy. So this is sort of my tribute to him. And in doing it, it's, I hope, helping other kids sort of figure out where they fit in and how they can fit in better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I actually have an interesting story for you. About 5 minutes before this phone call, my best friend Stacy called me, and I was just sharing with her a little bit about your story. And she said, I know exactly who you're talking about. Her neighbor in her building is Jessie.
Jesse McCartney Philgate?
Philgate, that's it. And she said, I know this story so well. Jessie speaks of her all the time.
Oh my
And
goodness.
she's so you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so she worked with your husband. Did she? Is that correct? Did she?
Jesse did?
I'm not sure. Did Jessie work with your husband?
No, Jesse worked with me, actually.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
we worked together at Canada AM a long time ago. My husband was working at W5 at the time, and we were all we to this day. I'm a really good friend of Jesse's. We were all very good friends. That just blows me away.
Me, me too. So she said, I know exactly who you're talking about and their wonderful story. And she had apparently she carries on that story, which is obviously very touching and important to her. So you were just speaking how, it can touch people and how it's just, meeting people and talking about these things. I think it's just amazing how there's that connection there.
Boy, it sure is. That just blows me away, Michelle.
Well,
That you've totally surprised me on that one.
it was literally five
Wow.
minutes before the phone call. So we're gonna have to get together and we're gonna have to chat some more, all of us together.
I think so. When Jessie gets back from Florida, where she is now, I
Yes,
think I'll come into Toronto and we'll all have an evening.
that would be lovely.
It
Yes.
would be terrific.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we can chat about your next book. I would love to hear more about the sequel.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Well, we'll do that when we get together.
for sure. Okay, so now I'm curious. I want to know, do you have sad days now? And think when thinking about your husband, do you have days where you're just like in bed crying, devastated, that sort of thing? Do those days happen for you?
No, days don't happen, but I think um, you know, grief is one of those strange things. It comes upon you when you least expect it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I may be driving along in the car along Ontario Street in Stratford, and I'll suddenly just be overcome. I'll see something, maybe a person, maybe just something, a book cover, something that reminds me so strongly of Heinz, and then I'll just have to pull over
Mm-hmm.
and have a little tear and then just kind of try and move on.
Mm-hmm. So rather than it overcoming you and lasting long, like a day or a long time, it's just a short period of time now.
Yes, yes. Often,
Mm-hmm.
often this will happen. But yeah, where I'll hear a piece of music on the radio
Mm-hmm.
that will, bring me to tears. The grief is a funny thing that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that a lot from people. They say, right when it happens, they say like, how I don't think I can continue, or how will I ever go on? And, I always just say right now it hurts really bad, but it's almost like later. It's not that pain or hurt doesn't go away, but it's maybe a little bit more tolerable.
Yes, it is more tolerable.
Mhm. Now, so do you have anything that you like to do in order to keep in a good headspace? Do you have like a morning routine? Do you do yoga? I know you've written the book, and obviously that is a huge piece to helping you move forward and continue on with life and finding the joys in life. But is there anything else that you find really helpful for you? And not even just for your husband's passing, but maybe for other things that you're going through that are struggles in your day?
Yes, and it's funny that you should ask that because the first thing that I do is when I get up in the morning, I go out and I buy my newspaper and I go to my local coffee shop and I sit there and I read my paper and have my latte. And it's a lovely little structure, a good start to the day. I run into people that I know. I mean, I know the two people who run the coffee shop, and lots of people I know come in. So I have nice chats with people. And then I leave and I come home to my office and my day begins.
Mm.
That's a nice structure, especially if you're living on your own and you work on your own at home. It's great to get out first thing in the morning and be around people. Reassure yourself that you're still part of the world.
Mm-hmm. I think I need to take that advice from you.
It's a good way to start the day. It really is. And I've been doing it ever since, maybe 3 or 4 months after Heinz died. I
Okay.
started to do that. Just forced myself to go and do that. The other things that I've done is I've sort of thought, what are the things that I've always wanted to do that I haven't done? So one thing was acting.
Oh, okay.
And yep, and my grandson said to me shortly before Heinz died, but Heinz was in care at that point. My grandson Miles said to me, "Nana, come on, we're going to audition. We're going to audition for a play." And I said, "Oh, I don't know, Miles. I've never done that." And he said, "I know, but you said you'd like to do it, and when you had time, and now you've got more time, so let's do it." So off we went and we auditioned for the Pink Panther, a local production here, and darned if we didn't get in. And so I've been involved with this theater group for the last 4 years, doing musicals and plays with them. And that's opened up a whole new group of people for
Mm-hmm.
me, a new community of people. I also took up painting. I didn't think I'd be very good, and I don't suppose I am, but I take a painting class once a week. I've met a lot of really nice people that way. I, I'm learning how to paint very slowly, but it's just also a really fun and pleasant thing to do. So I think one way of sort of trying to cope with grief is always to sort of think, okay, well, how am I going to embrace life now? I have to embrace life in a different way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try new things that I wouldn't necessarily have thought I could do, but I'm going to challenge myself to do them.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I think that's a great way to carry on. And I think that's important for anybody, really, but especially when you're grieving or when you have this past and this loss. Yeah.
Yes, I think it really hits home to you
Mhm.
that, we've got the one life.
Yeah,
We just don't get any more. So you just don't really want to be wasting much of it.
exactly. Exactly. Yep. It's yours to live, and you can either sit here and suffer and not do anything fun, or you can keep carrying on and find new people to enjoy it with. And yeah.
Yes, yes, I think it's very true. Um, Many years ago, well, not many years ago, in 2004, my 22-year-old niece, who was like a daughter to me, was killed in a car accident.
Okay.
And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. It was so sudden, so shocking, so horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother gave me a good piece of advice. I was really having a lot of trouble, coping at that point. And my mother was a very wise woman, gave me a very good piece of advice. And she said, "Nancy, you have to always remember life is for the living.
Mm.
So get out there and live your life and celebrate Pamela's life." It's a
That's
good piece of advice.
Oh, it's beautiful. And it's just the truth. Like that's amazing. Your mom's a smart woman.
She was a very smart woman. And so every year on the anniversary of Pamela's death, I do the joyous things that she and I would have done together.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, just a little celebration of her life. And I do the same basically on the day, the anniversary of Heinz's death. I just celebrate his life.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. My sister-in-law, when she came into our family, she had started, I think since her children are here now, they every year when it's my mom's birthday, they will bake cupcakes and they'll go to the gravesite and they'll celebrate her birthday. And I just thought that was such a neat way to celebrate in a positive way, and also just to have that yearly reminder and yeah,
Yeah, and chat and give good stories, talk about, remembrances. It's a wonderful way to
Mhm.
celebrate the importance of somebody in your life.
Absolutely. So, if somebody on the other end of this podcast is listening and they are suffering after losing a loved one right now, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, that's really tough.
Mhm.
Um, I think I'd say, you have to, everybody deals with their grief in different ways and different time frames. I think my mother's advice was the best advice.
Mhm.
Life is for the living, and we need to celebrate those people we've lost and we've loved, but we need to celebrate our own lives too.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Now, Nancy, where can we find your book?
Well, you find my book on either Amazon. It's available online. You can buy it online. It's not, as a download or as a book on Amazon or uh, Chapters Indigo or Barnes and Noble, and it's called Boy from Berlin.
Boy from Berlin. Wonderful. I actually can't wait to read this. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance before we were talking, but yes, I'm very excited. And the sequel is coming out, you said, this year?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the sequel is. And the sequel, interestingly, Michelle, deals in the sequel, Heinz, whose nickname is Kafer in the books,
Mhm.
he has to deal with the loss of friends. So it was an interesting exploration as to how he learns to deal with that.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, I can't wait to read that as well. But I think we will end there. Although I'm very excited to continue our conversation, hopefully over dinner someday soon.
Absolutely, with your friend Stacy and my friend Jessie.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was lovely talking with
It,
you.
it was lovely to have you as well. I'm excited already to have you back again. So thank you again, and everyone can go out and read your book and enjoy.
Thanks, Michelle. Have a great weekend.
Yes, you as well, Nancy. Take care.
Thank you so much. And say hi to Stacy for me.
I will.
Okay.
Say hi to Jessie for me.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for spending your time with me and the Move Forward podcast. I am extremely grateful to each of you. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to share this episode with someone you think would benefit. Also, if you could please leave an honest review by going to iTunes and leaving your thoughts and questions. Let us know what you would like to hear more of so we can continue to inspire and share with the world. Again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am forever grateful for this community that we are building and the individuals we are helping. Until next time, we hope you continue to move forward by choosing to move your body, your mind, and your soul. Thanks, guys.